to the Mama podcast. In this episode, we are joined by Charlotte Howden from Pregnancy Sickness Support. Thanks so much for joining us, Charlotte. I know that you've got lots to tell us about what you do for pregnancy sickness support, how you support parents. But why don't we start at the beginning and let us get to know all about you? Who is Charlotte?
Wow, how long is the podcast? That could be quite an open-ended one. Look, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Heidi. Really great to be here today. So a bit about me. Well, I certainly hadn't ever worked in third sector or charity sector before my kind of role at Pregnancy Sickness Support. I had done some work in not-for-profit, but I suppose my kind of journey comes from being a mum, experiencing pregnancy sickness and hyperemesis gravidarum, which we'll talk a lot about today in particular. But yeah, like just someone who enjoyed many different things in life until being struck down by pregnancy. Lots of different working backgrounds. And I'm still just a mum of one, which is also something we'll probably talk about today. And yeah, now the Chief Executive Officer at PSF.
Oh, okay. So, tell us about your story, your personal story, and how you then came to work for pregnancy sickness support. If you're not used to the charity sector, how did that happen?
Yeah, sure. So I fell pregnant with my son in 2015. So it's coming up to his 9th birthday next month, so 9 years ago. And yeah, just went into pregnancy like I think a lot of women do. Obviously really excited, really happy to be starting a family with my husband, and really quite early, around that 6 kind of week mark, I was just struck down by this really debilitating vomiting, sickness. That kind of then led on to the more severe nausea as well, but it was really the sickness that started for me first. And that started a journey into a world that I had no idea existed outside of the usual norms of what we're kind of told in terms of that early pregnancy period, especially with pregnancy sickness, or morning sickness, as some people or most people sadly call it, because I'm sure your listeners, even without having HG, will agree with me that pregnancy sickness doesn't just happen in the morning, and it certainly doesn't always end at the end of the first trimester. So just really excited, and then that all got taken away really with this condition. So I wasn't diagnosed with hyperemesis gravidarum really until just before my second trimester. Up until that point, it was very much, oh, you just have really bad morning sickness, you just have really bad morning sickness. But I was becoming more and more aware of the fact that either everybody was lying to me, or there was just something really wrong with me, because the two just didn't marry up. I was feeling just completely awful, debilitated, bedbound, unable to drink, unable to eat. My mental health was definitely failing at that point. But yeah, I was just constantly being dismissed as just having usual pregnancy sickness. So it wasn't the easiest pregnancy, to put it mildly. I got better eventually with the right treatment and medication in my second trimester. And then by my third trimester, I was kind of what you might call back to normal. But obviously at that period, with a usual pregnancy, the third trimester isn't the best. Lots of other things are happening to you. Really traumatic experience from something I had literally no idea about. And from that moment on, not straight away, because obviously as a new mum, there's the new mum process to go through, isn't there, of having a child and looking after them and looking after yourself, but not really thinking about all the things you've been through. So it wasn't really until my son was around 2.5 that I thought, I've had quite a varied career. I've worked in performance, worked on cruise ships, worked as a presenter, worked a lot in marketing and business, and I just thought I really want to do something that will kind of collaborate all of these things and see if I can generate awareness about this condition. So I decided to co-produce and presented the world's first documentary about Hyperemesis Gravidarum, which is called Sick, the Battle Against HG, which if anyone wants a more detailed version of my story, you can watch that. It's on YouTube. And yeah, that kind of just launched me into awareness raising, advocacy, and brought me together with pregnancy sickness support because they helped with the documentary, obviously as the only charity in the UK that supports families with this condition. It was an obvious place to start, and that relationship kind of really blossomed from there, really. And they haven't been able to get rid of me since then.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic that, you know, you're turning your experience into wanting to help others. So that's just fabulous. So tell us a little bit more about HG. What exactly is it and what causes it?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of alluded to the fact, we all know about pregnancy sickness. Around between 80 and 90% of women and birthing people will have some form of pregnancy sickness. So that could be quite mild. You might only have sickness in the morning. It might just be nausea. It might be a little bit of both. It might end, at 12 weeks. It might go on until 16 weeks. So it's a real spectrum condition. And that's the normal end of that spectrum. When you move on to Hyperemesis Gravidarum, which we have made easier to say by just saying HG, that is a severe complication of pregnancy. Around 3% of women will suffer with it in the UK every year alone. That's around 30,000. So this isn't, one or two people every year. This is around that 30,000 mark. It's likely to be more. It's a condition that is underdiagnosed, so I'm sure there are more people out there who have suffered with it. And yeah, it's a severe complication of pregnancy because it is excessive in every way you can imagine. It is excessive nausea, excessive sickness. It doesn't have to be both as well. You can have both, or you can just have one, but it has to be so severe that it limits your daily activities. And really quite simple daily activities as well. I'm not talking about, climbing a mountain because that's what you like to do on the weekend. I'm talking about brushing your hair, brushing your teeth, being able to be in the shower, look after your kids, that kind of thing. So it's very life limiting in that way. What causes it is a really interesting question. So we're getting closer to that understanding. We know there's definitely a genetic component to this. So there's something going on in the genes. There are other environmental factors as well, which will come into play. But I think the kind of headline of this is it is a genetic condition. So the reason why I mention that is that it's not anything that you can or cannot do. It's not anything that you have done. It's not because you didn't have best nutrition before you fell pregnant or because you smoked in your 20s. Like there's nothing you could have done to prevent this condition. And I think that's important because when you start to feel like something isn't right and everyone's telling you, no, this is just what it's like, this is just pregnancy, and then you're feeling so bad, and then even if you do get a diagnosis, it's very easy to blame yourself because you look at everyone else, peers, family, friends, and they've all had a usual pregnancy. It's quite easy to kind of say, well, what's so different about me? Perhaps it's something that I'm doing, perhaps it's something that I brought on which could not be further from the truth. There's no control over this condition.
Yeah, 'cause I guess you could think, well, others have seemed to have got by, or they seem to
Yeah,
have coped, or they seem to have got through it,
yeah,
suffering from pregnancy sickness. Why am I finding it so hard? But that's obviously because you're not suffering from the normal, usual pregnancy sickness. This
yeah.
is a completely separate condition in a way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's almost like, walking around and everyone's saying that the sky is blue, and you've been like, "Oh, it's definitely red." And that's what I'm experiencing. Everyone's like, no, it's blue, it's blue, it's blue. It, the narrative in our society, especially in the West, is this morning sickness. It's in all the films, as soon as you want to know a character's pregnant in a film, she throws up once in the morning, right? And then that's it. And then
Yeah.
suddenly she's glowing, and it's like, I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure. Many people have those types of pregnancies, even with usual sickness. So yeah, it's really, really difficult to kind of fight against everyone telling you that what you're experiencing is normal when you know that it's not. Yeah, that's a very, very difficult part of this condition.
What would you say are the biggest misconceptions about HG? What are the challenges that you come up against?
Yeah, so not very nice. Obviously the ones we've discussed already. So HG is not morning sickness. It's not usual pregnancy sickness. It's it's a condition in its own right. I think the other thing as well is sometimes with female health conditions, to raise that awareness, you will perhaps use stories of, the real severity of even a severe condition in its own right, because that's the newsworthy kind of stories, right? So the women who are being sick 40, 50, 60 times a day, and everyone goes, oh my gosh, that's so extreme. But like I said, you can just have debilitating nausea. Debilitating nausea is sometimes worse than the sickness, because with the sickness there's at least a little bit of a relief, even just temporarily. The debilitating nausea is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, does not stop. So I think because, and it's called pregnancy sickness, people think you have to be sick to have this condition, and that isn't the case. You can have the severe nausea as well. So I would say that's number two. Alluded to it previously. I think number three would be this idea that it's somehow a mental health issue, as in your mental health before pregnancy is somehow making you dramatic, make up how you're feeling. It's all in your head. Perhaps you don't really want to be pregnant, and that's why you're making such a fuss. Perhaps you're a bit of a princess, which didn't really help when at the time, now the Princess of Wales had this condition all three of her pregnancies. So we used to hear from, people on the helpline saying, oh, my doctor said, oh, you're just trying to be like Princess Kate. Like, if I was going to choose anything from that woman to have, it wouldn't be the sickness in all three of her pregnancies.
That's crazy, gosh, and that's really shocked me. I have to
Yeah.
say, that's really shocked me to think that that's happening and people are thinking that way. Yeah. So what is the treatment? What can be done to help?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, is to say there is treatment, there is medication that can be taken. I know within pregnancy, for many different reasons, there is a hesitancy to, even take, we restrict ourselves what type of cheese we're allowed to have and don't have this. So when you think about medication, it can be quite scary. But the truth is, for this condition, there's many medications that have been tried and used for decades that we do have safety information on. They're broken down into lines. So we have first line treatment, second line treatment, and then third line treatment. And the idea is that hopefully the first line treatments will help. They'll alleviate some of the symptoms, to try and get you back to some normality where you can eat and drink normally. You might not have the full range of foods and drinks you'd like to, like other women might do, but it's going to provide you nutrition. You're going to have energy, for example. So we kind of start there, and then we move up to other medications, which are just probably more severe in terms of the side effects for the mum, not the baby at all. There might be some other side effects for the mum, which, I won't go into too much detail, but quite severe constipation is one of them. So effectively, if a first line treatment is going to help you, which doesn't have that kind of side effect, then you want to start there, right, before going up the kind of ladder, and might have to deal with some of the side effects of those. But yeah, medications available. IV fluids is really important as well, because if you're not able to drink, keep water down, and even food, there's usually water, some kind of water, or an amount of water and food, you'll become very dehydrated. And it's really essential that those fluids are topped up, because otherwise you just end up in a bit of a circle of like doom, I used to call it, where you just feel full all the time. And I've never felt or experienced dehydration before. I don't think many people really have. I think, haven't taken your water bottle to work and you're a little bit thirsty is very different to dehydration, and then that in itself is an awful experience. So IV fluids is very important, and should be offered.
Okay, so you would have to go into hospital for that for a certain amount of time, I guess, while the healthcare professionals administer that for you.
Yeah, so as you're aware, the NHS is changing daily at the moment, but the NHS is different in terms of what trust you fall under, what hospital you would go to. So some hospitals will have day units. You can just go in the day, sit down and have your IV fluids. Others might want you to stay in overnight, or may only have the infrastructure for you to be admitted into hospital and stay overnight. And if it's more severe, that could be 2-3 days before they're ready to release you. So yeah, it's definitely within a hospital setting. Obviously, there's calls from pregnancy sickness support to change that. We think IV fluids are something that can be administered at home if we can get that infrastructure in place. It's far less distressing than turning up to a hospital, especially if you're feeling so rotten already with the smells and the noises and the wait times and that environment of people. It can be very upsetting and really traumatic, actually, especially if you are being sick quite a lot. We often hear of women being left, to wait in waiting rooms with a sick bowl for 3-4 hours, just constantly being sick, and people watching, and it's a very traumatic experience. That so we're hoping and calling for, as the NHS starts to change again, that's something that should be provided to women so they can have it at home. And also for people, it's not easy to get to hospital. I don't live close to hospital. My nearest is 30 minutes away. When I was suffering, I certainly couldn't get on a bus. I wouldn't. If I'd had to, I probably would have gotten a taxi, but I would have felt awful if I would have been sick in, a taxi. So I was very reliant on my husband having to take me everywhere, which then affects work and so on and so forth. So yeah, IV fluids are really important, and we need to change how we get access to those.
So that's something to consider then if you are suffering really severely,
Yeah.
and that is an option that you're being offered. Perhaps it's wise to think of putting a plan in place where you can access the hospital relatively easily. Because if it's something that you're going to have to do quite regularly, maybe there's relatives or friends that you could stay with during the week, perhaps to help you get to the hospital. And I'm also thinking about choice of care as well. What happens if your hospital, I mean, you've already told me one story already, but what if your doctor or your healthcare professional doesn't diagnose you with HG? Because I'm guessing it can be missed sometimes. What do you do in that instance? And could you then move to another hospital if you had one nearby?
Yeah, so I think the journey, because this is early pregnancy, the journey starts with GPs. So we always say, look, it's really difficult to advocate for yourself when you're feeling that ill. And it's really hard, to have waited in the waiting room at the GP surgery, get into the room and potentially have a GP say, it's just morning sickness, you'll be fine, get over it. And then you go home and you question yourself again. So, for me personally, that happened 3 times before I finally kind of lost it and said to my husband, I don't know what to do, because what they are saying is not true. And he was like, no, it's not. I'm watching you literally on the floor because you can't get into bed. And we just, the next time we went, he really had to advocate. I was like, no, we are not leaving here until you have done something. And then I was admitted into hospital. So It depends on the journey. Some women will be so bad that they'll have to call an ambulance. So they're then taken into A&E, which is obviously a different pathway than your GP. So I think the overall advice really just is that advocacy. Ask for a second opinion. It can be difficult when it's just you on your own, so try and have someone with you if you can do. Ask for that second opinion, say this isn't normal. And if you are admitted into hospital, make sure to ask how you get to referring again, because the initial referral might be via your GP, but then many hospitals will say, look, now you've been in here once for IV fluids and we know you're on the system, you can call us and book a time to come in, or you can just turn up, or our opening hours are so come in that period, and just get that knowledge so if you need to again go back in, especially for fluids and perhaps some medication top up that you can get in hospital, when you can go, which means you can then try and get that support in terms of who might be able to take you, who might be able to look after the kids or your children that you already have, and that kind of thing. So yeah, what you said is absolutely spot on. I think what can be difficult though is if it's a first time pregnancy like mine and you don't know you're going to have hyperemesis, you can't really plan before, so it's very reactive. And I would say you must ask for help and not feel a burden by ringing those friends and those family and say, look, we don't know how long this is going to last, but we really need your help and support right now.
Definitely. I'm a big advocate for that because people want to help.
Yeah.
People love helping people. We all want to help our friends and family. So when you need it,
Mm.
everybody around and helps. So definitely rely on that support. So tell us more about pregnancy sickness support. What do you do? What services do you offer?
Yeah, sure. So pregnancy sickness support, or PSS for short, again, it's a bit easier like HG. We've been around for over 20 years. We're the only registered UK charity that supports women and birthing people and their families with hyperemesis and pregnancy sickness. So our support services consist of a national free phone helpline that you can call Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. We have an email service that you can email in about your experience and what you're going through, and a member of our support team will come back to you with guidance and support. And probably our most popular would be our WhatsApp service. So we recognize it's really difficult when you're feeling as poorly as you are to perhaps be looking at a screen like I am now, or on a phone, and sometimes in between just lying down, that WhatsApp service can be a bit easier. Now, all of those feed into our incredible support team who have so much information on medications, treatments, how to advocate for yourself, coping strategies as well. And I think our biggest USP is our peer support service, which is a national service, which is run by our volunteer manager Tuesday. And we have currently around 170 volunteers up and down the country who have all had hyperemesis that we connect sufferers to. And it's like having that listening ear again via text or WhatsApp, just to speak to someone who knows what you've been through and knows what you're going through. Because family and friends can be wonderful. Some aren't always very supportive, but if they've not experienced what you've experienced, it can be very difficult for them to relate and potentially unintentionally say things that aren't perhaps helpful, or so the service is just incredible that we can connect in that way. We do so much, Heidi, honestly. So much to talk about, but from a sufferer point of view, I think those are the two main things. And the main strategy for us also is to empower healthcare professionals to diagnose and treat this condition. So we run CPD training online, live, on demand and in person, to really empower GPs in particular who don't get really any training on this condition. It's early pregnancy, so you're not under midwife care yet, and there's this kind of grey area in right at the start, which this falls under. And doing things like this where we get to come and talk about what we do in the condition in the community.
think that's fantastic. You're doing a great job. And like us, everything is twofold. You know, you've got to empower the parents as well as the healthcare professionals. So that sounds great. Raising awareness for them so that they can diagnose and give the right care at the right time. That's fantastic. So we've talked about some of the things that you'd like to see change. How do you think the most recent government might be able to get involved and change this?
Yeah. So that's such a big question, isn't it? I'm sure you feel the same as well. In
Oh,
this maternity world.
I could say a lot about this.
Yeah. Um, Look, women's health is incredibly important, and obviously we're a section of that. We're the pregnancy part, and we're the pregnancy part where pregnancy goes wrong. And I think there's been huge focuses in other areas within women's health, which is amazing. And it shouldn't just be, oh, what are we going to try and change this government or this 5 years? Okay, menopause, great, let's just do that. I think all women's health needs to be looked at, and I think hyperemesis in particular, because unfortunately it seems to be kind of, well, left on the sidelines a little bit, like, oh well, it's just morning sickness, or it's just pregnancy. That's really dangerous, and women are suffering as we speak right now from this condition, and we need a government to take it seriously, and I don't think there has been one previously that has. There's lots of changes coming up. We're waiting for the NHS 10-year plan. We have written into that. We've asked our community to do so. And the positive things that I might see is, this bringing things back into the community, like I've expressed. I think it's really important that the most severe sufferers of hyperemesis do have the ability to stay in hospital for as long as they need to and have the obstetricians and consultant-led care. But I do think there's a large proportion of sufferers, and I would include myself in that the severity of my condition and what I was experiencing became worse because I just didn't have that early intervention treatment. And if I'd been given that to start with, so via my GP easily, without having to go in and sit 3-4 times for appointments, I think it could be done online. I think prescriptions could be sent to your home address. That infrastructure exists. It did during COVID. Where's that gone? IV fluids can be administered at home, not for all, because there will be that part of the community or the sufferers who are very severe and they do need to be monitored, hourly, daily, whatever. So I'm hopeful that the government will take this opportunity to saying the right things, innovation, community led. I think there's really innovative ways that we could change care. My concern and my anxiety is that, again, hyperemesis would just be kind of left to the side because it's not one of the big women's health subjects. But I think that would be really naive not to think that women for 9 months having a chronic health condition, taking up beds in hospital that they don't want to take up, by the way, there's nowhere you would rather be than at home when you're suffering with this, not working, signed off sick, not contributing to the economy, not able to look after their children, not perhaps able to look after other family members that they might care for. It all has a really big knock-on effect. So I just hope they take this opportunity to take this seriously now.
Definitely, and I think we are getting on their agenda a bit more. I love the group that we're part of, the Pregnancy and Baby Charity Network, because we all come together, all the baby charities as a collaborative, don't we? And I feel like together we are putting pressure on the government to make women's health a priority, and then with that we're raising awareness of all the different areas of maternity care. That's the realm we're in, but I'm quite excited about that, and so I think at some stage, especially with the changes that are about to happen, I think they've got to sort of sit up and notice, really. Hopefully, when NHS England goes, there'll just be one sort of body to speak to rather than too many cooks spoiling the broth, I suppose. Um, has PSS got any other campaigns coming up at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So we've concentrated quite a lot on the physical sides of this condition, which is really normal because, you know, it's so easy to describe vomiting and nausea, but the mental health impacts of HG are alarming. The statistics are shocking. So HG sufferers 8 times more likely to suffer with antenatal depression, 4 times more likely to suffer with postnatal depression. 20% will be diagnosed with PTSD. And in terms of suicidal ideations, and we've recently had the news feature and our documentary launch, which is called the Jess and Baby Elsie story, which was about a really tragic case of a complete lack of care, which was experienced by Jess when she was suffering hyperemesis, which sadly ultimately led to her death, and that of her baby Elsie at 28 weeks pregnant. So the mental health impact when it comes to things like suicidal ideations, you know, nearly a quarter will have suicidal ideations occasionally, and then nearly 7% of sufferers will regularly think about suicide, which you just can't compute really when you're thinking about being in, you know, this pregnancy period, and it's supposed to be all wonderful, and yes, there's some difficulties to it, and, you know, other things that come into it, but that's how debilitating HG can be. So we can't ignore the mental health impact. So we launched this in March. It's called A Month to Change Minds, where we're taking a good month to really look at the mental health impact. We've got the documentary, the news feature, other items on our website, and then the campaign will actually finish on the 13th of April now, because we were really lucky to get some big give match funding, and we're raising money to provide or continue to provide the service that I haven't spoken about yet, which is our counselling service. So we have a specialist HG counselling service, and the service exists. People can pay for the service, but our aim is to have fully funded sessions so as many people can come and access counselling as possible, because there is a real barrier to getting mental health support in this country with wait lists, you know, and lots of other reasons. So the counselling service is really precious to us in terms of being able to support those who are currently suffering, but more as well as, which is as important, given the statistics in terms of the postnatal period as well with PTSD and depression. So that's our big push at the moment, A Month to Change Minds, so we can get the mental health side of this condition on the agenda as well.
That's fantastic, because that was going to be my next question. I was going to ask you what support there is, especially postnatally, because yeah, that must be such a weird experience to finally come out of not having sickness anymore, but then you've got this newborn to care for, and you're still going through all the trauma that you've experienced. So that's amazing that you've got that counselling service. That must be absolutely invaluable to all these women that are suffering so badly. How can people get involved? What do people want to get behind PSS and support you? You know, whether they're a healthcare professional, whether they're a sufferer, someone that you've supported, how can they get involved?
Yeah, lots of ways. I mean, obviously the peer support service, if you are someone who suffered with HG before, that's a great place to go and give back, because you'll be connected with someone and you'll know exactly what they're going through, and it is just such a wonderful way to give back. And our peer supporters are amazing, and you know, they do way more than they're supposed to. We're always telling them off, like, no, like, you know, you do this with boundaries. Like, no, I'm talking to them when I want to talk to them all day and all night. We're like, no, don't do that. Like, you know, have your life too, but they're so invested. So peer support's one way. Obviously, fundraising for us, there's lots of opportunities to do that. For healthcare professionals, we are often in contact with them. We want them to contact us and work with us on, you know, local programs. Are they looking to update or change their HG pathways in the hospitals that they work in? How can we help them with that or collaborate on that? The training, obviously, and just helping spread the awareness, because again, this condition, like other, I think, pregnancy conditions in particular, people always say, oh, I didn't know anything about that. It's really hard, isn't it, when we work in this network, like, how? It's everywhere. but people don't. There's so much to see online and take in. So being able to share and like what we do. But yeah, there's always campaigns and things to get involved with on our website. So I would definitely suggest people go and have a look at that.
Fantastic. And if anyone's listening to this right now who's really, really struggling, what's the first thing they should do, and how can they get in touch with yourselves?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, we've been doing this for over 20 years. We don't have the answers to everything, and there isn't a cure yet for this condition, but we are here to help. So the main ways to get in touch with us, head over to pregnancysicknesssupport.org.uk. All our contact numbers are on there. They're also on our social media platforms as well. So you can literally click a button, it will call, or WhatsApp, or if you want to email us, and just reach out, because even though you might be in the depths of despair right now thinking, everyone's saying this is normal and no one's listening to me, we will listen to you. So even if it's just that moment of relief, of validation, and actually, you might even go on to have a really great GP and everything's going to go swimmingly, and you're going to get the treatment and medication you need, and all your friends and family are going to get on board. But even if it's just that immediate validation of what you're going through, that this is a real condition, that could be really helpful. But we're here for however long, hopefully the pregnancy is a 9-month long-term, full-term pregnancy, but we're here for however long you might need us for, and you can reach out at any stage in that period. So please do.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for coming onto the podcast and telling us everything that you're doing. It sounds like you're doing a fantastic job, and we will be behind your campaign. We will be following your campaign, and we will share it. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much.